Would you like to know the big four drivers of depression and anxiety? And by drivers, I mean sort of causes, things that are creating depression and anxiety, but also, and importantly, how to reverse them? Well, if you do, please watch the video. Hello, my name is Jesse. Welcome to the channel Open Source Owners, where we talk about what if humans had an owner's manual. So the model that I use, if you've been watching my videos at all, you'll sort of recognize this model, and you'll keep hearing it from me because it's a critical model to my understanding of mental health and also how to treat mental health. And this is a model that I've developed really over the past 15 years of research into all things, both mental health, but also just general health best practices for keeping you healthy. So the four areas, of course, as you can see here, are the biological, and we'll talk about that in a second, the spiritual, the social, and the psychological. And together, those four overlap. Like any sort of Venn diagram, the overlap point is where really, if I had labeled the middle part, that would be called sustainable mental health. That's sort of where the perfect sort of dynamic equilibrium is, where we can maintain mental health despite life's tragedies or life's ups and downs or life's unexpected events. We can sort of always be in this balanced place, that is a dynamic balance between these four sort of overlapping conceptual ideas. So let's get into this here. So the biological domain, so number one, why do I label it number one? Well, in my understanding and the work that I do with my clients, I like to start with getting the biological health improved, more robust, make sure that we take away things that are obviously causing chronic inflammation, that type of thing, so that the rest of the domains can actually work a little bit smoother and a little bit better. And then from there, we go to the spiritual domain. And the reason I go to the spiritual domain next is because to have a mooring, to have an anchor into, purpose and meaning or some type of higher power, and we'll talk about this in a second, we'll also, combine that with maybe a better healthy ground of the biological domain working well. So you're getting more energy, you're sleeping well, you have a little bit more clarity of mind. That allows for the spiritual domain to really come in and for you to feel able, maybe finally, maybe for the first time, able to be connected to something that's a much deeper source of power than, like your labels in society, your job, your career, your position, whether you're a mom or a dad or divorced or not. All that stuff is not deep enough in the stack to help us feel very moored, very, very grounded within ourselves, wherever we are, whatever we're going through. And that spiritual domain is that critical anchor point. And then we go to the social domain. Now, why? Well, because the social aspect of being a human is actually one of the most profound support networks. One of the most profound ways we can improve our mental health is by finding ourselves surrounded by a tribe or a group of people with habits that we want to emulate. So positive, health-focused habits. And that might necessitate an upgrade in your social domain, in your social sphere. Doesn't mean you have to get rid of your old family or friends. It just simply means if you take an assessment of their habits, your family and friends that you hang out with on a day-to-day basis, or maybe you're completely isolated, and if that's the case, well then isolation itself is a driver of mental illness. So anyway, we take an assessment of our social circumstance, and then we might decide, okay, we need a tribe. It could be an online tribe, it could be an in-person tribe, that emulates the patterns of behavior that we want to emulate as well, or the habits of being. So maybe it's a church group, or maybe it's a walking group, or a yoga group, or a paleo group. Doesn't matter as long as it feels healthy to you and it feels inspiring to you. It could be martial arts or any type of thing like that. And then lastly, we cycle to the psychological space. And this is where we really do what is traditionally thought of as like the therapy work in mental health. So you're working with your therapist, you're doing talk therapy, you're meeting a psychiatrist, etc. Now, it's last in my model, even though that's the world I came from, is mental health, and that's pretty much all we focused on was the psychological talk therapy, trauma histories, coping skills, these types of things. But in my model, I think, and we can still play with this, and this may not be the pathway for everybody on earth. Nothing is like that, right? For other people, it may make more sense to number these and orient these differently. But for me, for my clients, I like to end with a psychological focus, because now we have three things supporting our deep inner work that we have to do to maybe heal trauma or to work with abuse or neglect issues. That's hard work to do if you don't have a spiritual mooring. It's very hard work to do if you don't have a social support group. They don't have to know everything you're going through, but a social group that can reflect back to you who you're becoming. Sort of a focus toward the future. And then it's very hard to do this psychological work if you're undermining yourself inadvertently, unbeknownst to you, with lifestyle, dietary, light habits, water habits that are actually causing systemic inflammation. Well, it's very hard to get to the psychological healing that we must do if we have chronic inflammation coming from our physical biology that's causing anxiety and depression, essentially, right? Okay, let's go into these a little bit more. So that's my path. We go 1 through 4, and then you do it again, and you always want to keep a balance between these 4 areas. And when we talk about the biological domain, you notice I have written in here, if you can see that, head injuries is one of those things. So any type of a traumatic head injury can cause and lead to things like anxiety, depression, confusion, brain fog, violence even. So taking into account your history and your biological sort of drivers of depression and anxiety will include a whole swath of things in the biological. In particular, these next 2 are absolutely critical to sustainable mental health and sustainable health in general. And that is your microbiome. How is your non-human living aspects of you? How are they doing? How's your garden? How's your ecosystem within you? Because you are just the result of your ecosystem within you and what it feeds back into the so-called human world. It's really a reflection of how your microbiome is doing, how your bacteria and fungi and protozoa are doing. And then, of course, the mitochondria, which is your energy system. So how's your energy system? Are you feeding the things that give you sustainable energy? Are you feeding them what they need to have sustainable, healthy, clean burning fuel sources and clean burning energy? And then sleep and light. So sleep is so critical to mental health and sustainable health that it actually trumps diet. It actually trumps pretty much everything else in terms of the biological sphere. And light is how sleep is driven. So understanding the light connection to sleep and protecting that, putting boundaries around that, bringing that into the forefront of your consciousness so that you're actually prioritizing good quality sleep will benefit your biology and reduce chronic inflammation more than almost anything. And then, of course, water, the quality of water you're drinking, how much water you're drinking really, really matters. And we'll talk more about that in my programs. And then diet, the types of foods that you're eating. So that's a big bucket. So the way I think that this is useful is to really focus. When you start working with me, you get some mentorship with me, start to focus on the biological upgrade of wherever you're at. Try to upgrade that domain for 1 to 3 months. So you just are lightly focusing on it. It doesn't have to be a big, huge commitment of time or anything, but you're slowly but surely setting up new habits based around biological imperatives, making sure that your microbiome is healthy, that the mitochondria is being fed appropriately, that you're prioritizing sleep, that you've improved your water, and you've played with your diet. There's no right diet. There's no wrong diet. But playing with the diet that works best for you is critical. And we don't have to be so dogmatic about being this or that. We can instead say, hey, I'm going to try this, then I'm going to try that, and I'm going to intuit my way into a diet pattern, an eating pattern that works best for me. Okay, so 1 to 3 months we work on the biological is the idea, and then we transition to the spiritual. Now, what am I talking about here? Meaning, purpose, could be nature, something larger than yourself. For many people, it's God. Many people hate the word God. It's too tied up into religion and all the horrible things that some religions have done on earth. So maybe source is a better term for you. Walter Russell uses the term mind. All is mind. But essentially, it's all the same thing. It's God. It's something bigger than you. It's the source. It's the creator of all this 14.5 billion years of universe and 4.5 billion years of Earth and millions of years of human development and evolution on Earth. It's what drives that. What's happening? All that stuff was going on before you existed, before humans existed even, right? It's that bigger, deeper, richer source of awe. And it's that bigger, deeper, richer source of you that fundamentally we must connect to and stay balanced within. And really, if you want to think of it away from that source and just think of it about we have to find and have meaning in our life, and we have to find and have purpose in our life. And that is the domain of spirit and spirituality. So let's take a month Let's take 3 months, 1 to 3 months, and work on the spiritual domain and improve and go deeper into that. Spend more time meditating. If you hate meditating, spend more time doing breathing practices that get you into a psychedelic experience, like a holotropic breath pattern. Learning about natural law, learning about spiritual law, learning about the Hermetic principles, studying Walter Russell. These are the types of things that we can do to deepen our sense of spirituality within ourselves. This is nobody else's relationship but your own. This is your inner balance point. If you think about the yin-yang symbol, the spiritual aspect is finding the balance, the line that travels between the yin-yang symbol. That's where we want to be, in that balance point. Walter Russell calls it the fulcrum of the duality, of the polarity of action, so coming from all of our actions can be centered from that spiritual point, and then we act from spirit, which then allows us to actually have a much more cohesive and consistent mindset and worldview about how we interact in the world. Okay, moving to the social, we talk about the Dunbar's number. That's the idea that humans in indigenous societies are the traditional humans on Earth from which we all came. We all have some connection back to some indigenous tribe or indigenous experience. Well, they all happen to live in what's called the Dunbar's number, which are tribes, essentially, or bands of people. And 150 persons is represents sort of a limit. Maybe we'll use the number 144 because it's more of a sacred number. But the idea there is you can know, you can remember, you can have connections with, you can feed, you can hunt with, you can set up, small traveling bands across, landscapes with 150 people pretty easily. When it gets bigger than that, as a human, you start having a hard time knowing everybody's name and history and intentions as well as you do at 150 person intervals or 144 person intervals. And even in corporate America or even in politics, we'll often see divisions. Say you're working in the CIA and you're working in a certain area, a certain group. Well, once it gets to be about 200 or 250 people, that group, that corporate division will naturally want to bifurcate into 250 person groups doing what they need to do, right? And so we see this again and again and again. And now it may be hard to find our Dunbar's number in this world, but that's the idea, is humans are meant to be nested within groups of people that reflect back to them, their spiritual beliefs, their life ways, their deep respect for the children and the elders within their tribe, right? Without that, we become less than healthy, I would say. We become sort of wounded in a way that we don't even realize. And of course, we're recognizing if we happen to be a disconnected or isolated person, what we want to do for this month and a half, this 1 to 3 months, is to start to make connections, strategic connections to different groups. And within our program, we set you up with a Power of 8 group, which is an online group where you're meeting with 8 or 7 other individuals to make a group of 8, which is basically a group of accountability and intention and healing. And we can do this over Telegram or over the phone or over Zoom. It doesn't matter. You can do it in person too. So the idea here is just getting ourselves into a healthier space socially where the people we're engaged with are reflecting back the types of habits and behaviors that we want to emulate. And then for the last 1 to 3 months, maybe this whole process takes about a year or 9 months or something, we would focus on the psychological domain. We would really understand our attachment styles and how those have fed into our relationships and are still. We would really begin to understand our own personal traumas or abuse or neglect issues. All those are different words for the same thing, which is deep wounds, right? And how those cause maybe parts of us that have been retreated. And in internal family systems, they call those exiles. How the wounding that occurred, particularly at the early ages from, let's say, 0 to 6, really set up these parts of us that we don't allow out. We're ashamed of or embarrassed by, and we try to manage and micromanage and control. And the psychological domain, we want to take into account things like head injuries and any history that we may have had from being born with the cord wrapped around our head to living in a war-torn country, to whatever it may be. The types of things that we saw while we were developing really affected our psychology, our understanding of self and other. And so we spend a month to 3 months working on the psychological domain. And then guess what? If you like this process, we're back to the biological. And then we get to try other things. Maybe we'll try fasting this time, or we'll try red light therapy, or we'll try cold breathing, or something like that, right? So we can do a different play in the biological space. Maybe we'll try to eat in ketosis during that time, or maybe we'll try being a vegan, whatever. And then we cycle back again through the spiritual domain and then the social, and on it goes. That's the balance, the dynamic equilibrium. And that's really how we end depression and anxiety, in my estimation. So ending anxiety and depression forever, which is really what I'm interested in, it's well and good to have pills or therapy that helps you in a crisis, and I've done that for years, and I really support that work. But it's much better, in my opinion, that we can get to roots of things and actually resolve things at the root. And when we do that, we get what I'm referring to as sustainable mental health, which is essentially just sustainable health. It's not mental anymore. It's just total health. And it's based on the balance between those 4 areas. Let's discuss some of the key features that we sort of talked about. We need to, in order to get this sustainable mental health, in order to end anxiety and depression forever, we need to systematically cycle through the big 4 drivers, right? Systematically, that's why I had things labeled 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. So it's a system. It makes sense. It's not just scattershot. It's not just ADD all over the place, without a coherent sort of map or roadmap. We also need to cyclically return to them in order to establish patterns of behavior, aka lifestyle change. And this is the big level up in mental health. Now, instead of talking about coping skills for the individual, or pills for the individual, or therapy for the individual, we're talking about lifestyle change. We're not talking about just, take these pills or go to this therapist forever. We're talking instead about, let's upgrade our quality of living so that it's in concordance with sustainable mental health. And you get to decide how that looks. Nobody's telling you have to eat vegetarian. But what we are telling you is lifestyle, your patterns of behavior might be driving depression and anxiety. And if we work on that 4-part roadmap, then we're basically covering everything that's essential. If you want to look more into what lifestyle change really looks like in a healthy way, look into the Blue Zone research and what I call Blue Zone living. That's really what we want to emulate in a very general way. Work with mentors and support groups. Now, you can do this on your own. Absolutely. It's very difficult to do on your own for accountability reasons, for trying to map together like all the pieces, because it's a massively complex puzzle. And it's hard to do if you are maybe living alone, or if you're living with somebody who's not equally as excited about it as you are. So it's much better to work with mentors. And notice I say mentors rather than teachers. We don't need to be taught. We don't need to be educated. We need some education. We need some knowledge to kick off behavior, but then we need mentors to help us sort of stay accountable and to guide us if we get a little bit lost, or to give us ideas and support. The support groups are critical, because then you're hearing from people going through the same thing as you are, but their perspective, their experience with X, Y, or Z. And when possible, test, don't guess with regard to things like supplementation or food options like food allergies, etc. This goes to the functional medicine space or the biohacker space, where we're at the point now where we have like these metabolite tests, and we can really understand what's driving our gut health issues. We can really understand if we have food allergies. We can really understand how our genetics, like SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphisms, play into our health and the diet that we must eat, etc. Right? Now, that's not for everybody, because it costs money, and I don't want anybody to feel like you can't do this with low budget, because you can. And in America, 60% of us live with less than $1,000 in the bank. So you can't be telling people with that much money in the bank that, you have to go spend $2,000 on testing. Hey, it may work or it may not. That's not a good sell. However, if money is not an issue for you, then testing is a great way to kickstart and to get an insight into the physical body and the physical body's sort of requirements. And then ultimately, we don't want to rely on testing. We don't want to rely on mentors anymore. We want to embody this in a way that we arrive at a sovereign, so we own this space, and balanced relationship to all 4 of those big 4 drivers, right? And that's the goal. Once we get there, we don't need any more support groups so much. We're just living that way. We're doing the Blue Zone lifestyle for ourselves and our family, and sustainable mental health is achieved. Sustainable mental health mission unlocked. You've leveled up. You're at a new level in the game. And anxiety and depression are basically resolved. No matter what happens in your life. That's the goal anyway. It doesn't mean you're not going to have hard times or have to do grief counseling at certain moments, or to, go more into support groups for a period and then arrive back out. That is the way out, in my opinion. So if you'd like these free ebooks, then these are my gifts to you. And you can also contact us and begin to, we'll be opening mentoring services fairly soon, where we do just this. We help people in groups through support, through those 4 steps in the roadmap, etc. And I will be, and your support groups will be like a mentor in that process. So if that's interesting to you, please reach out. You can do that best through clicking on the link below and putting your email in. You'll get these free e-gifts, and then we'll be in an email together, and you can let me know if you're interested in the mentorship process. And that was the big 4 drivers of depression and anxiety and how to reverse them. I think that this is totally possible, that we can reverse depression and anxiety forever. Now, I know that's a tall order, but I challenge you to consider it as possible, and I challenge you to think about that 4-part map and how that might actually get us there, when many other things don't get us there, at least in a sustainable sort of I'm free sense. You're not free if you have to take a pill, and if you stop taking that pill, the depression or anxiety comes back. So I'm talking about, again, full-on sustainable mental health that is just omnipresent, right? No matter the vicissitudes, is that the right word, of life, the vagaries of life throws at you. So on that note, thank you guys for watching this video. I appreciate you. I'll see you in the next video. Take care.